In the serene village of Nabera, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, lived a couple who were the epitome of respect and hard work. Mr. Olmo and his wife, Mrs. Olmo, were revered by the entire community for their dedication and generosity. Their milk business was the lifeblood of the village, supplying fresh, thick milk to schools and households alike. It was said that their milk was the most nutritious in the region, and the villagers believed it possessed almost magical qualities. The Olmos lived in a secluded house atop a hill, a place few had ever visited. Despite their popularity, they were known for their reclusiveness, rarely mingling with the other villagers. They owned 7 healthy cows and 3 robust dogs, and their business thrived, thanks in part to a lucrative contract with the neighboring schools. Mr. Gavey, the principal of the largest school in the area, had personally awarded them the contract, convinced that the Olmos milk was the best for the children. But as time passed, whispers began to circulate in the village. The milk, though delicious, had an odd taste that set it apart from the rest. And then, strange things started happening. Children at the schools began to suffer from persistent stomach aches, which no remedy could cure. At first, the incidents were few and far between, but soon, the ailment spread like wildfire. 2 children fell gravely ill, sending waves of panic through the community. Parents, fearing for their children's safety, stopped sending them to school, and the village entered a state of turmoil. With the schools closed, the Olmos business took a severe hit. Their once steady stream of income dried up, and the surplus milk piled up. In a desperate bid to keep their business afloat, the Olmos began offering generous deals. Buy 1 liter, get another free. The villagers, always eager for a bargain, flocked to their shop, and once again, the Olmos business was booming. But the strange illness persisted, and soon, entire families were afflicted. The once revered milk now became a source of fear and suspicion. As the villagers grew more desperate, so too did their search for answers. It wasn't long before their suspicions turned towards the Olmos, who, despite their outward generosity, had always maintained an air of secrecy. What the villagers didn't know was that behind the closed doors of the Olmos home, a dark secret festered. In their quest to maximize milk production, Mrs. Olmo had begun mixing her own breast milk with the milk from their cows. But that wasn't all. The Olmos, in their greed, had gone a step further. They were also milking their dogs. The dogs, once loyal pets, were now fed a special, highly nutritious diet designed to enhance their milk production. Mrs. Olmo, obsessed with increasing their yield, had even stopped breastfeeding her twin boys, Ben and Bien, so that she could harvest every drop of her own milk for sale. The dogs were kept on a strict regimen, their meals meticulously prepared to ensure they produced as much milk as possible. The Olmos operation was elaborate, almost mechanical in its precision. Every morning, before dawn, Mrs. Olmo would rise and begin the milking process, first with the cows, then with the dogs, and finally herself. The milk was then carefully blended together, creating the rich, creamy mixture that had captivated the village for so long. But their secret couldn't remain hidden forever. One fateful evening, a group of villagers, fueled by curiosity and suspicion, decided to investigate the Olmos farm. Under the cover of darkness, they crept up the hill, their hearts pounding with anticipation. As they approached the Olmos house, they heard faint sounds coming from the barn. A low, rhythmic noise, almost like chanting. The villagers exchanged nervous glances before inching closer. What they saw when they peered through the cracks in the barn doors would haunt them forever. There, under the dim glow of a lantern, stood Mrs. Olmo, her hands methodically milking one of the dogs, her expression a mix of concentration and desperation. Beside her, Mr. Olmo was busy mixing the different milks together, oblivious to the horrified eyes watching them. The villagers recoiled in shock and disgust. It was worse than they had imagined. Not only were the Olmos mixing different types of milk, but they were also exploiting their animals, and Mrs. Olmo herself, in ways that defied all decency. The next morning, the villagers gathered in the square, their faces grim and determined. They had had enough. The Olmos deception had gone on for too long, and it was time to confront them. With torches and pitchforks in hand, they marched up the hill, their numbers growing with every step. By the time they reached the Olmos house, they were a mob, fueled by righteous anger. The confrontation was swift and brutal. The villagers stormed the house, dragging Mr. and Mrs. Olmo out into the open. There, in front of the entire community, the truth was laid bare. The Olmos, once the most respected couple in the village, were revealed to be frauds, their empire built on lies and exploitation. The villagers, enraged by the betrayal, took swift justice. Mr. and Mrs. Olmo were punished severely, their home ransacked, and their animals set free. The couple was exiled from the village, banished to the wilderness beyond the forest, never to return. As they disappeared into the shadows, the village slowly began to heal. The pandemic that had plagued them faded away, and life returned to normal. But the memory of the Olmos treachery lingered, a dark stain on the village's history. And so, the tale of Mr. and Mrs. Olmo became a cautionary story, whispered by the fireside, a reminder that even the most respected can fall prey to greed and deception. And that sometimes, the most nutritious-looking milk might just be hiding the darkest of secrets. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more captivating African stories.